add anything, I'll get you to sign one of those too,
Yeah.
if we do that.
Sure. I got a birthday next month.
Oh!
I'll be 89.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to believe.
I know it. It is for me too.
Sorry.
I was born in the old Baptist hospital. It was called the Knowlton
Uh-huh.
Hospital. And I've got that record that I went up there, and because I went to work for the telephone company, and I had to have my birth certificate. Well, it was not on record at the Bureau of Vital Statistics. So I knew I was born at the old Knowlton Hospital. I don't know if you remember the Knowlton.
I don't.
Well, anyway, I went up there. This was back in the 50s, and I think what was that man's name? Dr. Whiteside, something like that. And he told me he got a copy of it. They had destroyed the originals,
Oh, wow.
but they had it on the old film. I think they called it.
Microfilm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, it just had baby girl, Raven. And I think my father gave them a cow. Calf. It was not very much. I can't remember. Was it $7 a day or something like that? And he gave them something else. I can't remember what it was, but I have all of that
Oh, great.
copied. And but we didn't have. That was back during the Depression, 1929.
All right, now I'm gonna stop you
Okay.
because I want to make sure we get all this recorded.
Okay.
So I want to get this done first, and then we're gonna start.
Oh,
So that
let me do this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put the note. Well, that was easy to remember. The day after July the 4th. But I'm the only one left on this block that was living here when I moved in.
Wow.
I think I was like 36 or something like that. We moved from Haywood.
that's where I
27.
am now.
You live on Haywood?
I do.
Do you?
I do.
2732 is where we live. That's
Okay, pretty
we were living
close.
there when she was born and my son. And today's date is the 15th.
Correct. I'm telling you.
Arthur came down here a while ago.
All right, you ready?
Ready?
This is an interview with Bernice Scott on June the 15th, 2018, conducted by Robin Waits with Brian Harmon at 2428 Monroe Street in Columbia, South Carolina. Ms. Scott, we're going to start. If you would just tell me when and where you were born.
I was born on July the 25th, 1929, in the old Knowlton Hospital, which is now Baptist Medical Center.
And do you know when your family first came to South Carolina?
I think, according to the records, maybe in the 1700s, it came into Charleston and Beaufort.
And what were your parents' names?
My parents, my mother was Ola Gertrude Kelly, Kelly.
And your father?
My father was John Marion Rayburn. Everybody called him Jack.
And were they also South Carolinians?
Yes, they were. Lugoff at Camden.
Do you know their parents' names?
My dad was Robert Abraham Rayburn. That was my dad's father, and his mother was Mary Lee Burdell, and she was adopted. And I have, yeah, that's my dad's parents right there. I don't know who these are, but this is Robert Abraham Raven and Mary Lee. She was a Burdell. She was adopted by John Burdell, and I could tell you about him.
So this is your mom, Ola Gertrude Kelly? Or is that
Yeah,
your,
I think that was my mom. I mean, it looks like her because
This is in Katie Mae.
oh, that's my oldest sister. Then she was born about 1917, I think. That's my mom there.
tell us a little bit about your mom.
I think she was one of maybe about 13 children. And her dad, he was a farmer, which most people were back then, I guess. And I didn't know until he passed away that he was a twin, but I was doing some research and found out that he was a twin, and I got a picture of his twin brother. But he had a lot of hunting dogs, and he owned a lot of land. And he was a friend of Bernard Baruch. And a lot of people would come down from up north, and they would pay him to take them hunting on his land, because he had a lot of land and a lot of hunting dogs.
And do you remember his name?
Well, but they ended up, I think, giving him a name of William, but his name they just called him Willie. And when he lived in Lugoff, and when he went over to Camden for some reason, they said, well, what is your middle name? He said, well, I don't have a middle name. They said, well, you need a middle name. He said, well, just put Willie E. So anyway, he ended up Willie E. And I think some people said he was William.
And Kelly, that was his last name?
Kelly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So your mother was one of, you think, 13 children?
I think it was 13 children in her family. Yeah. And a lot of them married Ravens, because I suppose that was mostly what was up there, was Ravens.
What do you remember about your mom?
She liked to have fun. But I don't know. Just that we had, it was really 8 children in my family. I was one of 8. And the second born passed away. Edith passed away when she's a little over a year old. I think she had pneumonia, and she passed away. But then the other 7 grew to be adults. But I was the youngest.
So who was the oldest?
Katie.
Okay.
Katie Mae, M-A-E.
And Edith was second.
Yes, Edith.
And who was number 3?
John William.
And 4?
Estelle Riola.
Will you spell Riola for me?
R-E-O-L-A.
That's an interesting name. And then the number 5?
Lois Helen, H-E-L-O-N-E. Alma Elizabeth. And Bernice, Virginia.
And what was life like for you growing up?
Well, I got picked on a lot by my older siblings, but we lived in Woodford. I was born here in Columbia, but we lived in Woodford. And I just remember we, of course, had no telephones, no television. We did have a radio, and we just had to heat by a little small coal fireplace. And I remember standing in front of the fireplace when it was real cold, because you couldn't get warm, the rest of the house was so cold. But you'd almost blister your legs. You would stand in front of the fireplace so long. But I remember growing up, I remember Pearl Harbor. I was 12 years old, and I cried all day long. I was so scared that, we were going to get bombed. And I remember the house burned, not when we were in it, but I remember writing on the wooden mantel the date, and I put Pearl Harbor on there. And of course, when the house burned, that burned. But and then they started with the troop trains coming in to Fort Jackson, and they would park over there for several weeks at the time until they finished training the ones at Fort Jackson, so they could be, shipped overseas after they finished their training. And of course, we couldn't get sugar, coffee, chocolate. In fact, we had to, I think I still have some of those little things that you had to go to the store to get anything. You couldn't even buy shoes. I remember my dad had this iron thing, and he'd put the shoes on there, and he'd half sew them on there. And we would go over there, and the troops on the train knew that we didn't have sugar and coffee and chocolate, and they had plenty of food, and they would give it to us. And we were so happy. We would run home and take that sugar and chocolate and canned milk, and Mom would make a big pot of fudge. Oh, it was so good. And I still make that fudge. But that was real interesting.
Where is Woodford?
Woodford is down. You've heard of North South
Yes.
Carolina? Okay, it's I think right before you get to North. My mother's oldest sister, her husband was John Rabin also, and he owned a lot of land down there, and my dad went down to farm it, but then he went into helping to build houses, and that's when he passed away. He was at working for the university in maintenance. My dad died right there while he was working in the McMaster College.
So when did you move to Columbia with your family?
I think I must have been about 6 years old, maybe, because I think I started in the first grade. We lived on Gladden Street, right off of Millwood, when we moved here. But that was Casey Grammar School. Yeah, but back then, the children didn't have shoes to wear. Some of them came to school barefooted. Now you couldn't do that. But my mother would always have those white shoes that buckled up on me. I'd come home from school and she would have those shoes polished before the next school day. And that big bow on my head.
Do you remember the address of the home on Gladden Street?
No, but I think it was in that first block off of Millwood, and it was maybe the second or third house.
Is it still standing? Is it still there?
I don't think so. Okay. I don't think it is.
Can you describe the house to me? Was it wooden or was it brick?
It was a wooden house. I remember out in the backyard we would had a swing, and it was a mulberry tree out there. And my mother would hang clothes out on the line, and the mulberries would just, and the birds would just stain the clothes. Because there were no washers and dryers. And I remember the lady that lived across the street from us. She was so nice, and she had children about our age. And she would take us down, I think it was to Emily Douglas Park, to play in that sprinkler pool. So that was fun. I wish I could remember their names, but I can't.
You're, in terms of the age difference between you and your siblings, were y'all pretty close together? Or
2 years apart, each one of them.
So growing up, were you pretty close to your siblings?
I was,
Yeah.
but they picked on me so much, and I'd say I'm leaving home, and I would leave, but then I'd come back when nobody was looking, and I'd hide behind the couch. But I can remember, you don't know what it was like to be so cold and so hot in the summertime, but we got used to it. We weren't used to air conditioning. No one had it. And now we can't do without it, but I remember the first television. It was at Krell Radio on Main Street. I think it was Krell. Krell.
Or not the Crest building?
No, not Crestville. I worked in Crestville.
Oh, good. You'll have to tell us.
I started to work when I was 14. I made 35 cents an hour. That was a lot of money.
What do you remember about the neighborhood when you were growing up, when you were a little girl?
Well, I remember we had a big China Bear tree in the front yard, and I used to climb up in the China Bear tree, and then the post office in Casey was a metal corrugated building. Miss Van Curen was the postmistress, and you would walk down and just ask her for your mail. They didn't deliver mail. You had to go to that little, it was just very small, and I would walk down there, and sometimes Mother would give me a nickel that I could stop at the drugstore across the street and get ice cream, and that was wonderful. But I remember one day I came home and I had that ice cream, and I climbed up in that China Bear tree, and I was so hot and started eating that ice cream, and I fell out of the tree. I passed out. And Dr. Adcock, that I worked with his daughter at Voc Rehab, and that was my doctor. And he came over to the house and he stayed there with me until I came out of that, knocking me out. But
So y'all moved from Woodford to Casey, and then
we moved from Woodford to Gladden Street.
Okay.
And then from Gladden Street to Casey.
Okay. All right.
And my dad bought that house over there. I imagine that house is over 100 years old, I guess.
Do you remember where that was in
Oh,
Casey?
my niece lives in it.
Okay.
She's put air conditioning, heat, and everything, and so my niece lives there now.
What's that address?
518 Lexington Avenue, Casey. Yeah, when my dad died, and then I think my mom lived about 16 years. My mom died on her birthday in 1976, on her birthday. And 3 days before she died, my sister Lois, she said, "Mom, we're going to have a birthday party for you." And my mom said, I dreamed last night I was having a birthday party with Katie, which is my sister that died in 75, and Daddy. And 3 days later, she had a heart attack. No, it was the next day she had a heart attack. And I was standing by her bed at Providence Hospital, and it was 12 noon on her birthday, and she took her last breath.
Hmm.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Yeah. But, and I remember on Sundays, Daddy would take us out to Fort Jackson, and all the soldiers were in pup tents, and oh, it was so hot, and they were out there with nothing but their undershorts on, just trying to get cool. But they would let you go into Fort Jackson. You could just drive through.
When was that? When would that have
That was
been?
during the war.
Okay.
Yeah, during the Second World War. Yeah, but we had to have blackout shades. Everybody had to have blackout shades because at night you couldn't have any light shining because they were afraid that we were going to be bombed if they flew over and saw a light. But my daddy, there's a picture of him with his uniform on somewhere. But my daddy would go around at night and wear his uniform. That's his hat he wore. He would go around the neighborhood and see if any lights were shining through the windows. But it was, and of course everybody was planting a victory garden, vegetables. And I remember I decided I would plant some radishes and things. And I guess I was probably about 13 years old, and I'd never planted anything. So I thought the deeper you dug the hole, the better the seed would be. So I dug the holes real deep and put my seed in it. I think I had one radish. I think it was on the radio about victory gardens. And then I remember the girl that lived next door to me, she's in California now. We had some kind of uniforms that we wore that we were not in the wax or the waves, but we were helping, and of course they had these little things they'd give you at school where you could fill it up and then buy bonds, savings bonds. And I mean, it was, you think about it, but it didn't bother us too much because we didn't know any better. We couldn't get butter or anything. Mother would give me, I think, a nickel or something, and I would go up. There was a Mr. Raines that lived near the railroad tracks because he worked on the railroad. They furnished him a house, and he had a cow. Mother would give me a jar, an empty jar, and a nickel or a dime, and I would go up there, and he would scoop the milk into the jar. She would let the cream come to the top and take that off and make butter. That was, yeah. Oh. But Kelly threw this on me yesterday, and I probably could have written down a lot of stuff. But we used to have, I remember going up where Brooklyn Case High School is. It was there, but behind there, we called it the field because there was no houses up in there. And my friend that lived next door, Betty, she and I we used to go up there, and there was this little building, a little wooden building. And one day we crawled in the window, and it was a lot of papers in there, and it was a Ku Klux Klan meeting house. That's where they would meet. And it was a lot of doctors and lawyers' names on it. And I was thinking the other day, if I'd gotten some of those papers, they'd be worth something. I'd have a lot of people's names that were in the Ku Klux Klan. But
were there very many people who lived around you in Casey where you were?
No,
growing
it
up?
was not a lot of people. There were not. All of that up there near the high school was just vacant land. And
what stores do you remember?
well, I remember this one store. Mr. Green had it, and he couldn't see. He had real thick glasses, and he still couldn't see. And he had gray curly hair. that was all down. And I would, we had chickens in our backyard, and ducks, and turkeys. My mother had all different kinds of pigeons, those puff pigeons and everything. She would order them through the mail. And Daddy built her a thing that was all enclosed with wire so they couldn't fly out. And I would wait for the chickens to lay an egg, and I would hide and I'd wait, watch them, and when they'd lay an egg, I'd run and get the egg, and boy, I'd run up to Mr. Green's and give him that egg, and I could get candy or paper dolls. And so my brother and I, he was in the Navy, but when it was 2 years apart. So we would go out and cut sourgrass. You've ever heard of sourgrass? Well, we'd take the wagon and we'd go out with some scissors and cut the sourgrass. And then we would sit beside the house and we would clean that sourgrass and we'd cut it in even pieces and we'd count and tie it up, with string. And then we would, if Mother would give us a nickel or something, we'd get pennies and polish them in the sand so they look pretty and polished. And my brother smoked cigarettes, Camels and Lucky Strikes. And it was tinfoil they were wrapped in. And so one day I thought, if I take a piece of that tinfoil and I smooth it on this penny, it's going to look like a dime. And I did that. And I said, Mr. Green's almost blind, so I will give this to him, and he's going to think it's a dime. I went up there, and I gave it to him, and he gave me 10 cents worth of candy and paper dolls. I was so scared. I came running back home. My heart was pounding. I thought, oh my gosh, what have you done? Oh, you can't ever go back up there. I thought, oh, you've just messed yourself up. Why did you do, I told myself, why did you do that? All you got was 10 cents and now you can't ever go back. But I did that, and that scared me to death. And I remember this lady used to walk in front of our house, and every day, I think she maybe cleaned houses somewhere. And so one day I decided I would take some, I don't know if it was grits or rice, and I put the grits or rice down at the bottom of a paper bag, little paper bag, and then I put some sand on top of it, and I tied it up, and then I put a hole in the bottom of the bag so that some of the grits or the rice could come out of the bag. And then I went and I sprinkled some along the road, and that I would sit there where she couldn't see me, and had a string tied to it. She would come walking along, and she'd reach down to pick that bag up, and I'd pull it. And she'd reach down and pick it up again, and I'd pull it again. That was my entertainment. Yeah.
Did y'all ever go across the river down to Main Street, or did you?
Oh, we did. The buses would run every 15 minutes because people didn't have cars, couldn't get gas. But you could buy 5 tokens for 25 cents, and a token would take you to Columbia, and if you needed to go somewhere else, you'd just get a transfer. And but the bus stop was always full. If you didn't get there early and get in the front, you might not get a seat. You might have to hold on to those things up there to keep from falling, because the bus would fill up. And yeah, we would go over to town to see like Christmas parade, and they had the lights strung across the main street. They didn't have the trees decorated. They just had these colored lights strung across the street.
How about the Assembly Street Market?
Huh?
Assembly Street Market.
Oh gosh, I remember when you know, it's a shame they tore that market down that was down the middle of Assembly. What a shame. Because wouldn't that be nice to have today for fresh vegetables and everything? But I remember going there with my mom and dad, and these people were sitting there shelling beans and snapping peas, and you know, and people were walking along, and you could get fresh vegetables. And then way down on Assembly Street, I don't think it was paved, and there were some old houses along there, two-story houses. And that's where a lot of the watermelon trucks were parked, had watermelons and cantaloupe. And I remember I was sitting in the back of the car, and I'd have the window down, and I'd say, "How about a free watermelon?" And sometimes they'd give me a free watermelon or a free cantaloupe. Yeah. And of course, we had no seat belts back then. And my parents, when they would go up to see their family in Luoff in Camden, I would stand up all the way. I'd stand up in the car. And my daddy always said, "You're walking all the way." Yeah.
So you were saying that you rode the bus across the river when you would go into town, that you would ride the bus across the river?
Yeah. It was just just the Gervais Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember if the bus was segregated at that time?
Oh, listen, I was on the bus one time, and Buck, he was the bus driver, and there were some black people, and this black man, he moved up toward the front, and Buck stopped that bus, and he told him, he said, and it was plenty vacant seats. And he said, "You get into the back. If not, I'm calling the police." Which was terrible because, you know, there were vacant seats there. Why not? Yeah. Yes, I remember that. And I remember the colored signs for the water fountains, you know? Yeah.
And I was looking at your elementary school picture the other day. Did you have interactions? Was it a pretty segregated community when you were living there?
Oh yeah, it was segregated. But you know, I remember my nephew. He was not that much younger than me, but he had this little black boy that would come and play with him. They would play together, and we had a black lady that would come. And I think I still got a cast iron pot around there. She would do our clothes in a big old cast iron pot, build a fire under it. And I think her name was Mary. And I think she would come just to get some food. We didn't have much food, but we'd share it with her. Yeah. Yeah, it was very segregated.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember when that changed? When you would have been?
I remember when I was in high school, Miss Geiger, she used to tell us, she'd say, "You better study hard," because she said, "I see these little black children coming and going to school, and they are really studying. And if you don't study hard, you're going to get left behind." I remember her telling us that. Yeah. She sure did.
Was your family involved with a church when you were young?
We were Casey Baptist Church on Holland Avenue. It was a nice little stone church, but it burned, and they built a new church. But I was into Sunbeams. I remember the Sunbeams. You know.
What are the Sunbeams?
They were just like. They were for the children of the church, called the Sunbeams. Yeah, and they would teach us things, and I remember in school they would give us a chart, and it had all these things about what we were supposed to do every day to stay healthy. We were supposed to wash our hands. We were supposed to brush our teeth. you know, and we had to check it down when we did it at home and bring it back to the school the next day for the teacher to see if we were doing all the things that we were supposed to do to stay healthy. So that was good. Maybe we need to do that back.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Casey Grammar School and Brooklyn Casey High School, and they just, when I graduated, that was 11 years and you graduated. I think it was a year after I graduated in 1946. And, 1946.
Were you involved in any activities at school?
No.
Any clubs?
Well, you know, back then, if you were female, the only activities that they wanted you to do just about was learn how to make beds, how to sew, how to cook, and keep a nice house, which I think now they need to get the males. The males need to know how to change baby diapers. They need to know how to cook. Males need to know how to keep the house clean and make their own beds and put on clean sheets. That's what they need to teach now. But now, I guess people just, a lot of males do that, but I think they need to teach them how to do it.
You said earlier that you had your first job when you were 14 years old?
I was 14.
And what was that? What did you do?
I got a job at Dodds 5 and 10 cent store. It was at the corner of Gervais and Assembly. And they had a basement, and I started right before Christmas, and that was the toy department down in the basement. And I made 35 cents an hour, but that was pretty good. That wasn't bad. You know, when you could buy a Pepsi for 5 cents.
So is that on the same side of the street as the State House? Or was it, where was it?
Across the street there, where that big building is now.
Okay. So if you're standing on the corner where the State House is, it would have been across Gervais Street this way?
Yeah,
Okay.
right across Gervais.
Okay.
Corner of Gervais and Assembly.
Okay. Do you remember any of the other businesses that were on Assembly or Main when you were working?
It was a lot of pawn shops. And you know, it's so funny. Back then, Main Street on Saturday, you could not walk hardly. It was crowded with soldiers in they were in their uniforms. I think they were required to wear their uniforms. And it was so crowded you could hardly walk, with nothing but soldiers. And then on Assembly Street, it was nothing but blacks. That's where the blacks shopped. And it's so nice now that we, don't have that.
So were blacks allowed to shop at Dodds when you were working there, or was that
I can't remember.
Yeah. It seems like that would be at a kind of transition point between Main and Assembly Street.
And then I worked at Cress's Dime Store. And there were no blacks working there, I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember blacks coming in there to shop. But maybe I can't remember.
So after you graduated from high school, what did you do?
I went to I worked at Cress's while I was in high school. I would catch the bus and go when I got out of school, and then I don't remember this lady's name, but she worked at the telephone company, and she said, "I've got a good job for you." And she was a supervisor at the telephone company. She said, "Come over and apply for a job, and you've got it." So that's when I had to get my birth certificate.
Mm-hmm.
But I went and worked for the telephone company. And
So
then
what was the telephone company called then?
Southern Bell, I think. I've got a picture. They took my picture when I was applying for the job.
I have it somewhere.
They took my picture and put it in their magazine when I was applying for that job.
How did that work with the phones?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, we had the thing in front of us, and these lights would come on. We'd pull up this thing, plug it in, and, you know, it's different now. But we used to have, and you could call the operator, and it wouldn't cost you a dime. So we had people calling us all the time, and we'd have this lady that would call us, and she would want us to get the N&G grill. We call it the nasty and greasy grill. And she would call us to ring them, and she would order wine or liquor from them. Yeah. And she would call every day. But you could listen in on any of the calls.
Did you listen in on any of them?
You know, not many, except that lady. But then it was another man that would call, and before he would answer the phone, I knew who he was. That light would come on, and I could hear his clock ticking. And he was calling, so somebody would bring him some wine or liquor. Bring it to him. Yeah. But, and finally I remember when they started charging for you, when you call the operator. You remember Arthur, lives in the next block? He used to call the operator all the time. And when his mother got that bill, oh my gosh, he had been calling the operator because he thought it was still free. She got a big bill. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I moved into this house, I had a party line.
I remember that.
I had a party line when I moved here.
You pick up the phone and somebody would be on it and you'd have to wait.
Yeah.
Just keep waiting until they got off.
Mm-hmm. And I remember they called me from the telephone company and said, "We're not going to have party lines anymore." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, how can you do that? I've had one for a long time." Said, "We're going to stop it." But,
So,
you know, my mother we couldn't even get a telephone during the war. We had to get a written statement from her doctor saying we needed a telephone because she had had a heart attack. You couldn't just get a telephone.
Wow.
And Kelly remembers when we would get gas for 21 cents a gallon.
I remember that.
5 gallons for $1. Kelly remembers that.
Mm-hmm.
So that hadn't been that long ago.
Well.
Well, like 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Scott, when did you meet your husband?
I was working at Carolina Life Insurance Company. I started to work the day that Jimmy Burns was inaugurated as governor of South Carolina. That was my first day there, and it was in that tall building there on Main Street. And I remember no air conditioning in those buildings. Windows were up. We had these big fans. And we had to anchor. It was no computers or anything, so we had a lot of paper. Had to anchor everything down. And the files, we had to, and you couldn't wear pants then. So we had to wear dresses. And we had to climb up those ladders. Sometimes to get files way up at the top of the ceiling. And it was sometimes it would be some students across the street at the old Wade Hampton. And of course they'd be hollering over there at us because we had our windows open. But, and my husband, then I worked there, it wasn't even a year, and they were building that new building at the corner of Bull and Lady, which Siebel's Roofs now. And they built that, and that was so nice because they had a cafeteria where we could eat. It would cost about 30 or 35 cents for lunch. And my husband was working for Wilbur Smith. When Wilbur first started, I don't know, y'all probably heard of Wilbur Smith. Well, Wilbur used to date my husband's cousin. And so Larry went to work for him as a draftsman. Larry studied under your granddaddy at the university. Yeah, and I would catch the bus to go to work, probably wearing high heel shoes too, and I walked from Main Street all the way over to Bull and Lady to go to work. And he'd see me every day. When I go in and leave, I made $1 an hour. That was a big change from 35 cents. And he found, if one of his friends knew someone that worked there, and we went with his friend and somebody else, and it was a blind date. And but we knew each other 11 years before we married. Because my mother's health was bad, and I just felt like I couldn't leave her, you know. But we finally got married. Yeah.
And his name was Larry?
Yeah, Lawrence.
Lawrence
Paul Scott, Jr. You know, that his daddy and his daddy's brother built 2 houses right together in 1922 on Cypress Street. The corner of, is it King? Mm-hmm. King and Cypress. His daddy was a math teacher at Columbia High School. They called him One-Arm Scott because he got one of his arms cut off in a gin mill, I think.
So when you and your husband got married, what year was that?
1961, I think it was. 1961, and my son was born in 1963, and Kelly, you were born in 1965? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's your son's name?
Lawrence Paul Scott III. He works up at the State House.
And Kelly, is it Kelly E.Y.?
Kelly. Just one E.
And where did you and your husband first live when y'all got married?
Well, over on Cypress, his daddy had built a garage apartment in the back because he had a double lot. That house is still there. It's a nice house. And we lived in that garage apartment, and then we bought a house at 2732 Haywood Street for $12,000. And then we stayed there 4 years, and we bought this house for $15,900 and something. We bought it from Alvin and Mary Strasburger.
Oh.
And the man that built this house was Mr. Love, that owned that Love Chevrolet. Cost $4,000 to build it, he told me.
Well, what was Shandon like? What do you remember this neighborhood like when you moved here?
A lot of old people. I was the youngest one here. But it was nice. Gosh, Lil next door, she could have told you a lot too, because she died last year on July the 24th, because we went to Greece for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And the day they kept texting me in Greece and saying, Lil's hanging on, waiting for you to come home, because we'd been neighbors for 50-some years, you know. And I got home on the 24th and went right over there, and 40 minutes later she died.
Wow.
She died. And we were the last two original people that lived here.
When you were on when you were on Hayward Street, were the houses kind of in proximity to each other like they are now? Or
They
was
were
it-
right there.
So it was pretty
Yeah.
well built up already. when
Yeah,
you
they were like, they about like they were.
Mhm.
And Mr. Ulmer and his brother that started, was it Home Federal Savings and Loan? They lived across the street, and they were the nicest people. They were so nice. But you know, I don't think there'll ever be another war like Second World War. You know, I mean, we've been in continuously, I guess, almost in war. But that was, you know, not having food. You couldn't just go in the grocery store and buy food. You couldn't buy shoes. You couldn't go and fill your car up full of gas. You couldn't buy a car. You know, it was.
Did you have family who were active in the war or in the war effort?
My brother, John William, he was over in New Guinea and over there in the Philippines, and my brother-in-law, he got that dengue fever. Isn't that from mosquitoes or something, dengue fever? And my younger brother, did I give you his name?
You did.
Lindbergh. Lindbergh Charles. He was born in 1927 when Charles Lindbergh flew the Atlantic. And so my mother named him that. Yeah, he was right above me. Yeah, he was in the Navy. He joined the Navy. He retired from the Navy.
And what branch was John William in?
Army. He's in the Army. I got pictures of him over there. I think Mother used to send him like cigarettes and things, and they would trade them for other things, you know.
Do you know if you have any family letters from that time?
I've got a whole thing of those letters that they used to censor. Somewhere I've got Mother saved them all. And I'll have to find them. But I know he would write Mother and he'd say, I can't tell you where I am or something. Or, but just want you to know I'm okay. They called them V-mail or something like that. They got a stamp on them. They didn't have to put any postage on it. Yeah, I'd have to find those letters. Yeah, they were, most of the time you would get not the original letter, but a copy of the letter. Because they would have to read it to see if it was okay. Yeah. And he sent me some things from over there, and I don't know what happened to him. I remember he sent me some pretty wooden shoes that were all carved. I don't know.
When you think, Miss Scott, about your childhood, are there people who you played with or grew up with who are particularly familiar to you that you have stories about? Or
Well, my friend that lived next door, she's in California. I went out to see her a couple years ago.
what's her name?
Hmm?
What's her name?
Betty Faye Good, Faye Good, and she's out there in Los Angeles. Oh, listen, and then after the war, that was probably during the war. After we grew up, they still had a lot of soldiers at Fort Jackson, you know, and so we started going up the USO, and that was the prettiest building up there, and they tore that thing down. Do you remember that building, the USO building?
I know photographs of it. I don't
Oh,
know
it was
that
so
I
pretty.
remember the building.
We would go up there, In fact, Fort Jackson would send a bus and pick you up at your house if you wanted them to take you up there to dance with the soldiers. And then you get on the bus and they'd take you back home.
So it sounds like Fort Jackson was had a pretty big presence
The-
in your life.
Oh
growing
my
up.
gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep. Used to go out there a lot. I told Katie,
Really pretty girls.
Katie, you know, you could go out there now. I mean, you could go to the
Mm-hmm.
restaurants out there.
Good idea.
Why don't we do that?
Do it.
Can you tell me a little bit about the people in that photograph?
Okay.
There's some.
Do you remember Mackie Quave?
I do not.
Okay, you know who I'm talking about?
I do not.
Cactus Quave on TV? No. Oh well. Anyway, that's me. And this is Nancy Freeman. And Nancy's sister lives at 2428 Duncan.
Is that
Na-
Sarah?
No, I know Sarah. But I think Betty Quave. Nancy's Freeman's sister, Betty Quave, that was married to Mackie Quave, who was Cactus Quave. He had, when TV first came out, he had a program on TV. And this was his sister-in-law. And this is my friend Betty that lives in California. And this is Millie Holstein. She lived over here near where, right off of Rosewood Drive.
That was at Shannon Presbyterian.
Hmm?
Was that at the church?
You know, I'm not even sure. Oh, I think it was his church uptown. Maybe First Presbyterian? I'm not sure.
Do you have any idea why that was taken or what you were doing?
Well, it was
or?
a Sunday. I'm sure we used to rent bicycles and go bicycle riding, and we'd meet. This was after the war, and we would meet soldiers. And like I said, we'd go up to the USO and dance, and then they would have dances out at Fort Jackson, and we would go out there too. And Miss Snipes, I remember she was sort of in charge of everything. But they made sure that we got home safe because they took in the army bus. They'd take you back. If you just go up and dance with the soldiers, they'd take you back home. But that was a beautiful building. Oh, I remember standing out on that balcony. Such a pretty building. And that's where Betty met her husband.
At the USO?
Yeah, at the USO.
I know, I'm surprised, Miss Scott, you didn't meet a soldier
I
husband
know
after
it.
all that.
I met plenty of them.
He was a soldier.
Oh,
later.
was it?
Yeah, he was in World War II.
Yeah. Well, you know, he was at Clemson, and of course, when the war broke out, he had to leave and go in the army. So when he came back, he went to university. But that was a teacher. That was our teacher right there.
And he
Do
studied
you
with
know?
Jasper Johns.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, Fort Jackson was a big thing,
Yeah.
and those troop trains coming in and giving us all that good stuff to eat.
Would that have been when you were living in Casey?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was living in Casey.
Where would the troop trains come through?
That's a railroad that goes right through Casey. Yeah, and we would go and we'd go over there, and they'd be full of soldiers waiting to go in to train to be shipped off.
Right by the quarry.
Yeah.
And I remember one of them used to come, and all we heated with was a fireplace, and he would come, and his name was Anthony J. Barnes. Good looking, and he would say, "Now when you grow up, honey, you let me know. I'm going to marry you." I remember his name,
Is he the one
Anthony.
that brought you the bicycle?
Huh?
Is he the one that brought you the bicycle?
No, that guy was in the Navy.
Oh.
Yeah, but you know, Casey, that was just, it's grown so much. Because when I think about, you know, no mail delivery, I had to walk up and get milk you'd scoot it in the bottle that Mom gave me. And, but that little post office, and Miss Van Kuren, she rode a bicycle every day down to that post office, and that's where she worked. You just walk up to the window and tell her you wanted your mail. And every day the rock quarry would blast at 12 o'clock. And if you didn't have things anchored, you might get some broken dishes or something. It would shake the ground.
I'm looking at my questions. Kelly, what have I missed?
Looks like that was probably around the State House, huh? Mm-hmm.
You know,
One of our boyfriends. Who's this?
I don't know. That was the soldiers. That's all I know. I don't know who they are. Oh, and that's me right there with those soldiers behind me.
Down at the State House?
See? Yeah, that was on the State House steps. Uh-huh. That was after the war.
Mm-hmm.
I'd grown up. But it was still a lot of soldiers out there. You know, Larry's daddy was in the First World War.
He was.
He was in the First World War?
Did Larry grow up in Columbia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What? Tell us a little bit about Larry's early
Well,
years.
see, Larry was born in 1924,
Okay.
and August 31st, 1924. And 2 years before he was born, his daddy had built that house over there. So
Right
that's,
on Cypress.
yeah.
Open clip. That's his father.
Wow.
That's my dad. I'm not sure who that is.
That's your granddaddy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's Larry's daddy, and that's Larry's daddy right there, too. World War One.
Mm-hmm. And where would those have been taken? Do you
These?
know? Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know.
This one says.
I've got some cards.
This is Camp Seville, Greenville.
Oh, Camp Seville in Greenville. There was the training camp up there. Do you remember that, Robbie?
Mm-hmm.
There was a training camp in Greenville during the Second World War. And that's where Miss Duke started making her mayonnaise, I think. Mm-hmm.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Duke's mayonnaise.
She would make
made it
it
for
and make
soldiers.
sandwiches and sell them to the soldiers. And you know, my daddy's mother's adopted, the man that adopted her, he was the first police chief in Columbia.
What was his
John Burdell. He was first chief of police in Columbia. I've got his will. And he didn't like my granddaddy. When my grandmother married him, he about disowned her. I think he had adopted my grandmother and two boys. One of them was a doctor. The other one was an architect, I think. And anyway,
My dad's a painter.
but he left well, he's not blood kin because he's supposedly, but we think he really had my grandmother out of wedlock. That's what Kelly and her husband have been tracing back. And they think it was really his daughter. Now, didn't you and Jim say you thought that was really his daughter, that he had her, and then he didn't marry the woman until a long years after that?
Sorry, I was.
Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, he left $100,000 to help the people in Camden, regardless of their color.
Mm-hmm.
When he died in 1911. I think he was born in 1821. You got his will.
Mm-hmm.
And he left $100,000 to the help the people in Camden and his family, because my cousins used to get free care at that hospital up there. But one of them told me, said the last time she went to get free care that they told her that money had run out. But he left $100,000 back then. And he left the 2 adopted boys in the will. What did he leave each one of them? How many $1,000s? Which wouldn't be much now, but back in 1911 was a lot. But then his name is in a book that I have that was published by the university. Because he arrested a student, and then the other students got together and said they were going up and beat him. And I think one newspaper clipping that we found said that it was 15 of the students went up there because he had arrested one of their friends for doing something. And said he knocked all 15 of them out. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's right up in that book I have.
You'll have to show that to us.
Yeah, John Burdell, first, I think he made $16 a month.
But he left enough money to build a very nice gravesite for himself.
Well, you know, he left, it's funny, his wife, he's buried in the Quaker Cemetery in Camden. His wife is buried at Springdale Cemetery in Lugoff. Now, I've heard that he sat at one end of the table and she sat at the other end. And if they had anything to say to each other, they would ask this maid that they had, and that's the way they communicated with each other. But he left, was it $1,000 in 1911 to build a fence around his grave at the Quaker Cemetery in Camden.
Wow.
But you know, I've got records where my great-grandfather, back during the Civil, is it great-grandfather? I can't remember. And John Burdell, yeah, they were in some kind of trouble with killing somebody. You remember all those records I have? And the War Department, they had to go before the War Department. And they said John Burdell's mistress. So he was not married to her to begin with, because they said Fanny somebody and something else that were slaves of John Burdell. His mistress, whatever her name was, Mary, I think her name was Mary too, like my grandmother. That's why we think it was really blood kin. And then in his will he said that he had a bedstead that was very valuable, that he gave a gold piece of, I forgot how much, gold piece to a refuge for that bedstead, and he said it was very valuable, that he put that in his will.
That might be, that will might be something that would be good for a place like South Carolina, or to at least have a look at and see. It might be good for research purposes as well.
Kenny, you have that will. But it's interesting because he owned the block in Camden where the bank was. And it was some property up there that he said it would be never to be sold, but handed down from generation to generation. Well, I'm part of the generation, but is that it?
That's Mary Burdell.
This is his wife's will. Now, she claimed my mother. She claimed my grandmother. But when she married my grandfather, yeah, this is her will.
This is interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So do you have the originals of these as well, or the originals in an archive somewhere?
It's probably in Camden.
Okay, good.
I imagine it's in Camden.
Interesting.
That's kind of interesting what
It
he's
really
done.
is.
This is-
That's interesting there.
This is his will right here.
It's from his police report.
He put, I think, 2 or 3 codicils to his will. Kenny, you got the pictures of them? Him and his sisters?
Mm,
Is it on the back?
yeah, this is talking about what he did later to people. Anyway, we're getting bogged down in this.
Yeah, we can. But I'm wondering here.
No.
What the pictures would be here. They said he was a mean man.
So I'm interested just for my own personal and your husband's work as an artist and time at school at USC.
Mhm.
What can you tell us about that? What kind of art did he do? What was his?
You know, I think you've seen some of his pictures. He did, Kenny,
I have some at my house too.
you got some pictures back there that he did. You know, Jasper Johns was in that class with him. But I think he told me that nobody liked Jasper's work. Said your granddad didn't even like it because all it was like circles or numbers or something like that. And Larry said, and then he and Jay Barden and they were all going up to New York. But then I think Larry changed his mind, but Jasper went up there, and Larry said he met this lady that made him famous. I mean, I don't know. You got some of Daddy's pictures back there that he did?
Have met him.
He did, now the one, his nephew has it down in Florida, and he won't give it back to us. He was not supposed to have it anyway, but
That happened.
he used to do, and his sister was really good. His sister studied there too, and she took art lessons.
What's her name?
Anne Scott Reinecke, Reineckke.
They call it funny.
You're gonna have to spell that last name for me.
Reineckke.
Okay. Mhm.
And the guy that she married was Paul Sorge, S-O-R-G, Reinecke, and his father wrote the words to the West Point alma mater.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And I'm married to a West Point grad.
But Miss Rembrandt, was there Miss Rembrandt? Yeah, I think we called her Bunny. She took lessons, private lessons, I think, from Miss Rembrandt too.
And Augusta Witkowski, those were the.
That
You
name,
remember that one?
yeah. And she was in that Trum Artist
Mm.
Guild, yeah. She was good. She was real good. She and her husband lived at Laurel Crest until they passed away. And she used to have, at Laurel Crest, they put all their paintings up along the halls there. She had some pretty paintings.
There's Mr. Reinecke, right in here. Right?
What?
Paul Reinecke.
Oh, yeah.
And my
So
dad used to build
there's some
boats.
There's some photographs that Kelly has that I would love to have a look at, and there may be some photographs that are related to Columbia, or even just Richland County that we might be interested in scanning if you would be
Okay.
willing
Yeah,
to
that'd be.
do
I'll
that.
try to find those letters from
Yeah,
Second
that'd be
World War.
great. That'd be great.
Now I've got a video of Myrtle Beach before it,
Mm-hmm.
in my '59 convertibles. It's in the garage out there. We were riding down Ocean Drive, and it was the first. You'd have to wind the camera, the video camera, you know. And we were riding along. In fact, Paul Jr. was driving that convertible,
And then you
and
got
we were just taking all the pictures of Myrtle Beach going
Oh, that's
down.
awesome.
then you got the Jeep times.
Yeah.
With my grandfather.
He
had a
paid
house
$50 for that Jeep.
from the
And
post
painted it baby blue. And we used to drive, his mom and dad had a house at Garden City. And we used to drive up and down the beach in that Jeep, have more fun. We'd have about 6 or 8 people piled in there.
Well, I'm gonna stop us with this part, and then maybe we can have a look at some of these photographs and
Okay,
and then figure out what some next steps might be.
okay.
But thank you for your
Well,
time
thank
and your
you.
stories today. This has been good.
I'll find those letters. I know I still have them. But where in the world are they?
maybe in that closet back there. Or in this.
I don't know. You know, some people throw everything away. And my son,
Mm-hmm.
it's going out. And I told him, I said, when I pass away, don't you go in my house and throw everything out. Because I have things, I mean, I take things, and his wife throws away too. I will think something's pretty and I'll buy it and I'll take it up to the lake. And the next time I go up there, what is this?
We have a little house at Lake Murray. My
It's-
dad built.
I had a pretty butter dish. And I bought it and I took it up to the lake. And the next time I went up there, no butter dish. So gone. And,
You gotta take his key away from him.
huh?
You gotta take his key away.
Well, he's up there all the time. He's got a big garden up there.
Well,
All the corn and tomatoes and squash. I
Wow.
brought squash home.
So my dad built that house and used the floor when they were tearing this church down
Yeah,
years
the
ago. He
hardwood
took the floor
flooring.
out of it,
oh wow.
and that's the
Oh,
floor.
They were
like
tearing a
that.
Sunday school down over here.
Mhm.
Now, he bought that lot in 1959 for $1,800. 127 feet on the water,
Wow.
an acre, and I pay over $5,000 a year taxes.
Yeah, right.
And it's still just like
Tiny
900
house.
900 square feet.
Big as this. But they say that it's not the house, it's the property.
Mhm, right.
But
Do you know what of those are local or
Yeah,
kind of
We
Columbia?
can
Okay.
we can figure it out.
Okay.
Of course she knows,
Yeah.
but a
and
lot of
I'm
them
trying to find those letters. And then I've got that old thing of the Hillbillies where they used to play at the Township Auditorium, and the Kittrell sisters used to sing
Oh, I know
and
the
yodel.
Kittrell sisters.
They would yodel.
Yodel.
I mean, I think there's an organization at USC called MERC. It's the Moving Image Research Collection. And that video of Myrtle Beach might be something that they would be really interested in.
Because
in
now
seeing.
most of those things are not there anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were in that '59 convertible just cruising, taking pictures, taking videos.
Do y'all drive that every now and then? Have
It's in the
seen-
garage.
Have I seen y'all in it
It's
before?
been,
Yeah.
it's
It
been
doesn't
in that
rain.
garage 40
It does.
years, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Well, don't let your son get a hold of that.
You know, it needs so
I
much
know.
work.
I know.
It needs so much work done on it.
Mhm.
He said he didn't want it.
Mhm.
It's going to take $20,000
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
to fix it up. But then it would be worth more than 20.
Brian's daddy
You
has
picked
a
the right
car.
person to
Oh, really?
Really?
put some love into it, yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw one yesterday, the exact same car, the guy that has the green one, just like it, that rides around.
Yeah.
Saw him yesterday.
Oh, did you?
Or today. And almost bought.
Yeah, Larry bought that in December. That was his present to himself in 1958. It was a new 1959 retractable convertible, and I think the bill of sales, I believe, in the glove compartment,
Wow.
3,900 and
So
something.
incredibly original.
Yeah. But yeah, it's Owensville.
Because I have an extra picture of that I can give to you.
Wow.
These, I think, were at Cypress Street.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, any of
There
those,
you
that
go,
would be
25,
great.
27
Yeah.
Cypress. My grandmother.
Mm.
And this, one of the relatives. But I love the pictures of Clara.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Clara,
great.
so she was, she kind of raised my dad.
Oh, Clara.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
see
did
that?
you see the one of her with the turkey in her hand?
The chicken, the
That is
turkey.
incredible.
She worked for them,
Where's that one?
and then she went after the war. She went up to New York or New Jersey and worked for a doctor. She came with her sister, and she kind of took care of Larry. And then after the war, she moved to New Jersey, worked for a doctor. Then she and her husband came back down here, lived on Lakeside Avenue, I think. And we went out to see her. And when she saw Larry, she called him Booty. She said, "Oh, come here, Booty, and sit on my lap and let me rock you like I did when you were a baby."
Oh, my gosh.
Now her last name was Belton?
Belton, Belton, Clara. I love that picture of her with the turkey.
It's great.
Is this your dad?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a great Main Street.
Mhm,
I'm
right.
assuming that's Walgreens. Yeah.
Charleston.
Little skinny thing.
Mm-hmm. And he used to build boats. He was really crafty.
Mm. Oh, wow.
He loved building boats.
He built that.
Huh.
He built several boats.
He built some
That's
like cuddy
beautiful.
cabins.
Do y'all have any of his boats still?
No.
The last boat he built was mahogany
Wow.
and all solid brass screws,
Cypress Street.
and it could sleep 2 people. And before he finished it,
Grandma was a
they
book.
said he had a heart attack, but it really wasn't. But at that time they said it was really his gallbladder. But he sold it to I think it was Hart Con, the part owner of Carolina Life Insurance Company where I worked.
That was the
Oh,
beach
that's
house.
great.
Mm-hmm. Destroyed by Hurricane Hazel
Huh.
when they rebuilt it.
Oh, wow.
Now I've seen the lake change. Oh my
Oh, I
gosh!
bet.
When we used to go up there, if it rained, we couldn't get out. We had to go down, walk down to Dr. Pike's. He lived down on the corner. He had a tractor, and he would have to come up there to pull us out. Now we got a paved road all the way down to the house.
Yeah, he loved cars. He went to the car dealership business.
Yeah, it is big.
Mm-hmm. Nice one there.
I'm trying to think what kind of resource there is in Garden City, Cypress City,
Mm-hmm. Cypress Street.
1958.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now Larry took some pictures, of 5 Points.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I've got pictures of 5 Points before it changed so much.
Oh, we love to see those.
See, Wilbur had his office right there on Divine Street in that first block, in a house, when Wilbur first started. Larry was the first person,
It's in the garage.
Larry was the first person that Wilbur, Larry, and at 25 years, he and James, which was Wilbur's brother, and Larry, when they had 25 years, they wanted Wilbur, and they wanted them to get a nice gift. So of course they had to give Larry one, and it set clock right there with Larry's name on it.
Oh my gosh.
It's very nice.
I thought you were gonna say a car.
I love it. It's right here.
Yeah.